Now that we've gotten a chance to go over our do-nows and have a discussion in class, we're going to do a little bit more insight into our lesson for today. So, now that we're going to think about the puzzling question, what happens over time after an ecosystem is disrupted by a natural disaster? Let's take a moment to think more about the ecosystem. Part 1 of Process and Procedure on page 41. I want you to answer questions A, B, and C with a shoulder partner, and you will have 5 minutes. Okay, now that everyone's finished, turn and talk with the person next to you and share your responses from the video guide, Wolves and Yellowstone. Each person will have 30 seconds to share. Partner level voices, and go. It's an example of Ellie's student-centered direction, where students are being guided accordingly to what they have in front of us and their resources that are available to them. They're able to discuss with each other and with little to no interruption from the teacher or the individual guiding them at the time. The next point is notice and name. Michael and Susan immediately tracked each other to share their responses. Ryan and Jasmine are using partner-level voices. It's an example of Ellie, authentic praise, naming what's going on in the classroom and giving praise when appropriate, boosting overall class morale, and letting the students serve as an example to others, as an example for positive reinforcement for the rest of the class, hoping that the rest of the class catches on to that kind of technique. Going on to using attention getter. Once you have 100% of scholars tracking you, ask 3 volunteers to share ideas. And as we go along, we will record ideas on chart paper. That is also an example of authentic praise and guiding by example and making sure that students are aware of what's going on during the classroom and during that particular part of the lesson, and ensuring that everyone knows and is on the same page. And the next point, we're going to make sure that we all have discussions and we're all intact on the same page. So this discussion is designed to elicit students thinking about where organisms get the matter and energy they need to grow, and where the matter and energy go after the organisms die. So we have students listening to other students and encouraging them to listen to each other's ideas. This gives a good playing field for the rest of the students to interact and learn from each other without having immense pressure. Although the NGSS call for some of these concepts in elementary grades, some students won't have much instruction, others will retain misconceptions. They may realize that animals need to obtain food by eating other organisms, which may be plants or animals, but not understand that plants essentially make their own food. They might suggest that plants get most of their matter and energy from soil, or that animals getting energy by sleeping. They may have little idea of the role of decomposers in returning matter and energy to abiotic components of the ecosystems. Record the ideas on chart paper to revisit later. This gives a good way to go over the students' ideas and make sure there's no misconceptions within the classroom, especially if they're in lower level classes like elementary or middle school. And it gives a good learning opportunity between students, because if one student may have a question or a misconception about an idea, it means most likely other students will have the same misconception or idea in their heads as well. In this activity, matter isn't formally defined as stuff, and energy is not defined. Students are likely to have been introduced to energy in previous grades, and formal definition of energy tend not to be helpful. As the chapter progresses, stress that energy can be transferred by moving around objects, sound, light, heat, electric current, or chemical reactions. In this chapter, the energy transferred by light and heat, and energy stored in food and released as food breakdowns are especially relevant. At the end, allow students to have discourse and share their thoughts for 2 minutes, and prompt students to use terms such as I agree when or I disagree. Once the time is over, give a summary about what you heard during the discussion. So this is all really good for team building activities, for creating discourse in classrooms, for giving different examples of teaching platforms such as the structures between cross-content strategies. In the first couple of sentences, there were good examples of student-centered direction and sincere and authentic praise, as I mentioned before, which allows everyone in the class to be positively reinforced throughout the lesson and throughout the day, while still being able to have open discussion and the ability to learn through each other.